The Star Sport podcast is brought to you by Access Credit Union. Access Credit Union, funding dreams for over 50 years.
Close your eyes and pull like a dog.
And a new Irish record for Phil Healy, 22.99.
Christy Cooney hands over the Sam Maguire Cup to Graham Canty, Cork All-Ireland champions for the 7th time ever.
Hello and welcome to the Star Sport podcast. My name is Jack McCarran of the Southern Star and I'm joined in studio by Star Sport editor Kieran McCarthy. Before we kick things off, I'd just like to give a gentle reminder to our listeners and viewers to please rate, review and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and YouTube. The Star Sport podcast is brought to you in association with our friends at Access Credit Union. Access Credit Union, where your bank really does matter. Choose the credit union, choose local, choose community. It's an athletics special on the podcast this week as we reflect on the performances of the West Cork contingent at the National Indoor Championships last weekend. Glengarriff's Dara McElhenney was the star of the show at the National Sports Campus in Abbottstown, defending his 3,000 metre title with a blistering run of 7:49.18, setting a new record for the championships in the process. Elsewhere, Phil Healy finished second behind her Olympics teammate Sophie Becker in the final of the 400 metres, while sister Joan Healy also finished a close second behind Killarney's Sarah Lahey in the 60 metres final. Athletics journalist Cathal Dennehy was on hand across the weekend and he'll join us on today's show to break it all down for us. We're also going to be joined by Mealamoose footballer Rosaleen O'Brien of Kilnamila GAA Club. She's one of 24 individuals selected for this year's LGFA Learn to Lead Female Leadership Programme, and she's been chatting to Ger McCarthy. Firstly though, let's look at some of the other big West Cork sporting headlines from the last week, and I suppose, Kieran, the best place to start is with Cork's loss to Dublin in the National League at Páirc Uí Chaoimh on Sunday, which you were at. We said last week that John Cleary would be targeting a win against the Dubs, but despite some poor refereeing decisions, do you think he'd ultimately be happy with the 2-point defeat, considering the level of performance?
Happy with the performance, not the result. And you could see after talking to John Cleary where he was not a happy camper when it came to talking about the referee. But Dessie Farrell was the exact same, the Dublin football manager. You'd hate to talk about referees after a game. They have a hard enough job as it is, but some of the refs' calls during the game, they just kind of beggar belief at stages. And I think from a Cork point of view, it's the fact that Ian Maguire was red carded early in the second half for 2 yellow cards. And that second yellow card, okay, it was a slight tug on Dean Rock's jersey, but Dean Rock didn't even break stride. I would say Dean Rock didn't even feel Ian Maguire kind of trying to grab his jersey. It was so soft, and you could see even the feeling afterwards from former footballers online to their reaction to, oh, the game is gone. If this is the way it's going to be refereed, if this is, John Cleary made the point after, if that the referee in question probably wouldn't get a game up the north, because that's a physical game up the north when it comes to the championship. So it just was unfortunate that some of the headlines were about the referee, because the game itself was really good, especially that second half. And while ultimately Cork lost by 2 points, 18 to 2-10, they came within the width of a crossbar and David O'Hanlon's fingertips of grabbing a late goal. Cork captain Brian Hurley, 78th minute, which was the 8th minute of injury time, unleashed a rasper. If it went in, it would have won the game, but ultimately it didn't. It crashed off the crossbar. So it was a 2-point loss for Cork. It leaves them on 2 points after 6 games. But this was still encouraging though, because Cork went toe-to-toe with one of the best teams in the country. Granted, it's not a Dublin at full pace, and I'd argue if Cork met Dublin later in the year and in the height of the summer, you'd see a different Dublin team. Like they rolled Jack McCaffrey off the bench the last day, they rolled James McCarthy off the bench. He's an 8-time All-Ireland winner, so they'll be a different beast once they get up and running. But I think, and we've always said in this podcast, we've got to be very realistic where this Cork team is. We're talking about a mid-table Division 2 team that's aspiring to get to the top of Division 2, ultimately up to Division 1 in the next couple of years. So for them to do what they did and push Dublin for so long is really encouraging, because I'm thinking back to last year's Cork-Dublin game, the quarter-final up in Croke Park, where Cork lived with Dublin for 50 minutes and then they faded in the last quarter. But instead, last Sunday in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, we actually saw Cork finishing the stronger, which was very encouraging. Cork showed character when they were down to 14 men, because they slipped 5 points behind when Dublin had their full 15. And again, you're like, Cork could have dipped the heads, but they didn't. They battled back and actually drew level. So a lot of plus points. Brian Hurley was sensational, really, really good. He scored 8 points the last day. But you could tell early on he was just up for this game. He was winning ball out in front. He was showing for the ball. He was accurate from frees and from play. Like, he played a real captain's role. He was one of the standout players. So a lot of positives to take from Cork, but they lost the game still. I think a worry too will be the lack of spread of scorers. Like I said, Brian Hurley got 8 points and Cork got 210 in total, and I think they need a bigger spread of scorers. Stephen Sherlock had an off day the last day. He was on fire when they played Meath in Páirc Uí Chaoimh a couple of weeks ago, but the last day, whatever he kicked, I know he finished with a couple of points, but it just wasn't the Sherlock that we know he can be. So there's room for improvement. But consider where Cork are now. They lose by 2 points at home to Dublin. They're disappointed, and they have room for improvement. So I think it's a good place for Cork to be as they go into Limerick this Sunday in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. And now the challenge for Cork is they have to win this game. They really do have to win this game, and it's the next test for Cork. They're coming off the back of 3 Leinster teams where they probably weren't favourites in any of those 3 games. Now they're going to be favourites against Limerick, and how they deal with that and how they back up the Dublin performance by putting in a performance that garners 2 points. It's another step in this Cork team's journey to get where they want to be. So I'll be looking for Cork to win on Sunday, but to put in another performance.
Just briefly to finish up on this game then, Kieran, we're at the halfway stage of Division 2 of the league. Cork have lost 2 of their games. They've got 2 points on the board. If you were writing the mid-term report card for John Cleary and his Cork side, what grade would you be giving them at this stage? Given the level of performance has been quite good, but the results just haven't been what they would have hoped for, I guess, apart from the Kildare away win. And obviously you could argue that they should have beaten the Dubs only for a poor refereeing decision. So taking it in the context of this season only, you're probably looking at a B minus, because we're dealing with where Cork are right now, as like I said earlier, a mid-table Division 2 team. Cork won all their games in the McGrath Cup. Then they lost to Meath in that opening Division 2 game in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, and that's what we spoke about in the podcast. That was disappointing. But then they bounced back and they beat Kildare really well away from home, and they competed really well against Dublin. It's looking more and more like that Meath performance was the outlier, because the body of work that we've seen from the Cork footballers and their 6 games so far, 3 in the McGrath Cup, suggests that this Cork team is moving in the right direction. So I'd say B minus, but with room for improvement. And that's why this next run of games, Limerick at home, Clare away, Louth away, with the greatest respect to those 3 teams, these are winnable games. And best case scenario is Cork could be on 8 points going into their last home game, which is when Derry come down. And wouldn't that be some occasion up in Páirc Uí Chaoimh if there's something on the line for that game? Like, Derry are flying, but Derry are home to Dublin. I think it's March 4th. So depending on the result there, if the Dubs get a result, it could mean that Derry might need a result coming down to Cork. I know this all ifs and buts, but there's optimism in your voice anyway. There is definitely optimism, so I think it's been encouraging. And what I like too is it's very much a settled team. John Cleary has his first 15 and his subs off the bench, and that's that consistency of selection that Cork haven't had the last couple of years. So you're hoping now that the consistency of performance will follow that. And in fairness, it's starting to, that Meath game aside. So that's why I want to see another good Cork performance on Sunday against Limerick and get a win, because it's just increasing that body of work, and that level's more optimistic going into the summer. Good stuff, Kieran. To soccer now, and Bandon star Conor Howrahan has been enjoying a sensational run of form for Derby in League One of late, scoring 4 goals in his last 8 games to help steer the Rams into the promotion picture. And given the season that Derby are having and the season that Conor's having with them. This move seems to have really worked out for him.
Yeah, he's really found his feet of late. He's really found his feet. He's four goals in the last 8 or 9 League One games. He's a couple of assists there. I think he had another assist a weekend, didn't he? So he's really found his feet with Derby, and that's good because he had a couple of unsettled seasons there. He had his loan spell at Sheffield United last season, which probably didn't go as well as he would have hoped. He was on loan with Swansea the season before that for half a season. That's when his time at Villa was coming to an end. So he'd an awful lot to contend with at the time, but he's settled in at Derby, and I think Derby fans too, looking at forms, they're delighted now they're seeing the real Conor Hourihane, because if you think back to why Conor got that move to Aston Villa in the first place, was because he was a goal scoring midfielder. Like, he was a creator there. He's that magic left foot. And that's why Villa came calling for him back in January 2017. And even in his early seasons with Villa in the Championship, like, his stats were really, really strong, really good, because he always he sets himself a goal target. He wants to get X amounts of goals a season. But they dried up over the last couple of years because he just wasn't settled in any one team, because he was moving around the place. But now he has a place to call home. He's settled into that midfield. He's getting the goals, he's getting the assists, and Derby, I think they're 5th in League One now, so they're in the promotions places to go up to the Championship. So it's looking good for Conor, and I think that's good news too for his Republic of Ireland aspirations, because we've spoken about it before as well, where he's well over 30 caps now. But I think he's never really cemented his place as a starter for the Irish team, and even under Stephen Kinney now, he's more of a sub. So I think it's important, if Conor Hourihane is playing well, he's going to be in that Ireland squad. And like, I'd be shocked now if he isn't in the Ireland squad for the upcoming games. France and Latvia, two huge games coming up. And to have Conor Hourihane on form, I think it's good. He's a leader on and off the pitch. Hopefully he can start to transform that form to Ireland if he gets the chance. But we talked about Brian Hurley beforehand being on form, with Conor now as well. They're actually great mates, the two of them. You go back to their football days when Conor Hourihane actually played football. He was a very talented Gaelic footballer with Bandon, and Brian and Conor are actually on the same the Cork kind of schoolboys football team that played in half-time game. I think it was down in Fitzgerald Stadium in Killarney, and they've been great friends ever since. So good to see the two lads going well in their different codes.
Absolutely. Finally then, Kieran, spring has arrived. The smell of fresh cut grass is in the air, and the county leagues return this weekend, and naturally there's loads of West Cork interest across the weekend, and I'm just going to give some of the fixtures that stood out to me going through them today. On Saturday, in the Cork Credit Union's Football League, Clon take on Carrigaline, Castletown Bear travel to Nemo, and Island Rovers make the trip to take on Bishopstown. Then on Sunday we have a huge West Cork derby. It's Castlehaven hosting Carbery Rangers, Newcestown meet St Michael's, O'Donovan Rossa host Fermoy, the Honeys travel to Knocknagree, Bantry welcome Newmarket, Bandon take on St Vincent's, and Adrigole host Boherbue. So that's just a flavour of the action across the weekend. And to your mind, Kieran, what should we be looking out for? Obviously the eye is drawn immediately to the West Cork derby between Castlehaven and Carbery Rangers on Sunday.
Yeah, football is back, baby, and we're delighted. So it's great. We're at this time of the year now where the Football League is back this weekend, and then the following weekend the Hurling League is back. So the club action, they're going to stretch their legs, dust off the cobwebs, and we're back into club mode. So huge games coming up. Sunday morning, Castlehaven against Carbery Rangers in Division 1. That's going to be a very interesting game, because these two West Cork heavyweights are in the same group in the Premier Senior Football Championship later in the summer. But I think what's interesting for the opening rounds of the league, we have a lot of different or new management teams. Carbery Rangers now have Seamus Hayes in charge, so this is his first senior football game as a manager. Seamus has taken over from his namesake Declan Hayes, and he's coming up against Castlehaven, managed by James McCarthy, one of the top teams in the county, one of the top 3 teams in Cork, along with Nemo and the Bars. So it's going to be a tough opener for Carbery Rangers. But I'll caveat that by saying we don't know what clubs have done. It's the open round of the league, so it's going to be interesting to see how teams get on. We have a new manager in Clonakilty. Martin O'Brien has taken over from the legendary Hawley O'Neill. We have a new management team in Island Rovers, and Diarmuid Duggan, friend of the show, he is no longer with Island Rovers. I think he was too busy with our podcast, Jack, and he just couldn't give time to Island Rovers. So Diarmuid put so much work into his appearances on this podcast. And
he ensured Island Rovers had a decent end to last season.
Oh, he did, yeah. And it's taken an army to succeed Diarmuid Duggan. So this is their management team for our podcast listeners. Head coach is Colm O'Driscoll, better known as the Tig McCorrick footballer. And they have a management team of Ger Carey, Johnny Holland, Tom Young, Brian O'Driscoll and Owen McCarthy. So last year you had Diarmuid Duggan and Jason Willey as the joint managers, but now Island Rovers have shaken it up and they've gone with a head coach and management team.
Ger Carey of Horse and Hound fame, do we know?
I don't know.
Republican in Skibbereen.
Could
also
be.
Member of Island Rovers. If it is him,
could well be. Our podcast listeners watching on YouTube might drop us a comment to let us know if it's D. Ger Carey. So it's going to be interesting how the different management teams find their feet in these open rounds of the league. But it's just great to have that club scene back. And of course, we'll have a lot of club football and hurling coverage in the Southern Star over the coming weeks and months, so keep an eye on that.
Okay, Kieran, coming up next, we're going to chat to Cathal Dennehy about the West Cork contingent that impressed so much at the National Indoor Championships over the weekend.
The Star Sport podcast is brought to you by Access Credit Union. Access Credit Union, funding dreams for over 50 years.
Glengarriff's Darragh McElhenney was the star of the show at the National Sports Campus in Abbottstown at the weekend, defending his 3,000 metre title with a blistering run of 7:49.18, setting a new record for the championships in the process. Elsewhere, the Ballyneen Bullet Phil Healy finished second behind her Olympics teammate Sophie Becker in the final of the 400 metres, while Joan Healy also finished a close second behind Killarney's Sarah Leahy in the 60 metre final. In a few moments, we'll be joined by athletics journalist Cathal Dennehy. But Kieran, firstly, this was another star-making run from Darragh. Every time he races now, he seems to make major impressions and improvements.
Firstly, I'd have to correct your pronunciation of Sarah Leahy. Sarah Leahy.
I was thinking.
I don't know too many Leahys out there, so for our Leahy listenership in Killarney, which is extensive, like the whole Leahy family listen to us, just say congrats to Sarah Leahy winning the goal. But back
Sarah Leahy.
Sarah Leahy.
Say Leahy, so apologies, Sarah.
So Sarah Leahy is the 60 metre women's Irish champion, but Darragh McElhenney is the men's 3,000 metre champion for the second year in a row. And the Glengarriff man is just dominant. This is his fourth Irish senior men's title in the last 12 months. He's won 4 in a row. Started last year, February 2022. He won this title for the first time, which was his first Irish senior indoor title. Then he won the outdoor 5,000 metre title for the second time. Then he won the Irish men's cross-country senior title in Donegal in December, and now he's defended his men's indoor 3,000 metre title. So the body of work that Darragh's putting together now is fierce, impressive. Like, he's a man in form, and he's 5 national titles to his name, 5 senior national titles, and he's just 22 years of age. So what is he going to end up with? It's the sky is the limit for Darragh. But this was very impressive. I was talking to him before the weekend, and he'd raced 2 races in Boston, and he'd set 2 indoor PBs, but he wasn't happy because the races didn't pan out the way he had hoped they would. So for him to go in and put in a championship record performance last Saturday, it was just the boost that he needed going into the European outdoors. The race panned out just how he wanted. Nick Riggs took to the front, Darragh sat in behind, waited for his time, and with overlap to go, he just took off and he ran a sub 25 second last lap to streak to gold. And he's going to go to the European indoors in Istanbul. They run from March 2nd to 5th. So it was a really good outing for Darragh.
Okay, well, a man who knows all about Irish athletics is journalist Cathal Dennehy, and Kieran, you caught up with him a little earlier on.
So Darragh McElhenney, back-to-back indoor champion, Cathal. It was very composed and mature performance by him on Saturday. What was your big takeaway from it?
I would say my big takeaway was, one, he had 2 races before this. Obviously, he'd 2 in Boston, 1 over 3K and 1 over 5K. And the 3K was good. Not, I suppose, great for him because he faded the last 100 meters. But then in Boston, kind of similar thing happened. Kind of what happened to him at the Europeans in Munich last year, where he was going for a big performance, but then he just blew up in the last lap in that race in Boston University. And I think that probably dented his confidence a little bit. And so coming back into this, I suppose it was all about he'd run 2 poor last laps in those races in Boston. And I suppose it was literally the opposite in terms of he just sat on Nick Griggs, did the smart thing. And we know by now that Dara has the best finishing speed in those Irish distance races, and no one can live with him. And that's the way it was. And I think to just flip the narrative upside down, he went from, dying a death in 2 races over 3K and 5K in Boston to absolutely blowing the doors off everyone here in Dublin. That was with a 25-second last lap. And, the guys out there on the circuit, like some of the best guys in Europe, that's the kind of finishing speed they're closing with. Now, they'd probably be doing it normally off a faster pace, the likes of Jakob Ingebrigtsen. So obviously there's a bit to go yet, but to have shown that is the kind of race Dara will be looking at towards the European indoors. Will be that kind of, I think he ran around 750. So it's like most of those heats and even the final tend to be won in times like that, but with an absolutely blistering last lap. So I think he set himself up perfectly with that run.
What you put that quick turnaround down to, like you said, over in Boston, he probably wasn't happy with his final laps in both races, but then he put in a 25-second last lap last Saturday. How was there such a quick turnaround? And what was the difference? Was it because the race in Dublin was that bit slower, or?
I think it could even be, psychological in terms of because Dara was the top dog at that level at the national indoors, and he has been now for some time. Like we saw it last year, and he was the best athlete in that race. But I suppose what happened in Boston was he wasn't the best athlete in the race. He was probably the 6th. Those were world-class fields. He was the 6th, 7th, 8th best athlete maybe. And I think it can just maybe it gets to any athlete at times when, you're going all out, but then there's someone in front of you and you're seeing them pull away from you. And I think that can maybe get inside your head a bit. Now, that's probably coupled with the fact he probably was also fading a bit and maybe was a little bit too ambitious, in the 3rd, 4th kilometer, maybe in Boston, things like that. And I think, but I think what was shown by his ambition there was that he is in great form and his training is going very well. And perhaps he just wanted to pop that really big time. And that, I think, was the reason he went to Boston for those races. But it kind of backfired a little bit on him because I suppose he was so ambitious. If he'd been a little less ambitious, he might have actually run quicker. But he went for it, and I suppose you can't fault his attitude in that department. But then coming back to Ireland, I suppose it was like, I am the top dog again. And all he needed to do was sit there and again blow the doors off everyone. But the speed he shows, if he can transfer that same racing mentality to the European level, you'd expect to see him go very well again and be up there. I suppose the way he was for so much of that European 5,000 meters race last year. I know the last 300, it fell to pieces, but he went 95% of the way in that race as one of the top 6, top 8 guys in Europe.
What's a realistic target for him heading to the European indoors?
Well, he's ranked. It's so difficult to kind of make an impact at this level because there's so many guys who basically are the same as Dara. They're 740 something for 3,000 meters. He's ranked 19th currently in the quota, and 24 athletes get in. So I think making a final, basically, if Dara can get into a European final, that would be huge. I think if he can just navigate those heats, it will be difficult, but he is exactly the kind of athlete, if he gets it right on the day, who's able to do that because, like we said, he has that finishing speed. And usually with these heats at European level, they don't tend to be, running like 740 or a really fast time. It tends to be like 7:55, 8 minutes, but with a blazing last kilometer. And I think Dara probably got a bit found out at times, like at the World Indoors last year, and a bit shocked by just how quick all those guys on the circuit can close. But this time, I think the difference is he's not going to be surprised by it. He knows exactly what's coming. And based on yesterday's performance, he looks ready for it.
You alluded to there that Dara has a lot of races under his belt already this year. One West Cork athlete who doesn't have that many races under her belt is Phil Healy. She made her seasonal debut at the national champs last weekend in the women's 400 metres. I was chatting to her just last week and she was saying she was 6 weeks behind where she wanted to be. So she probably travelled up without the usual expectation last weekend, Cathal, and she won silver behind Sophie Becker. So how would you rate Phil's opening weekend of the year?
This is one where I think it would be an insult to Phil Healy and the class she has to say it was good. It was bad, she won silver, but it was bad. And I think Phil would say it was bad. Her coach Shane McCormick would say it was bad. And I'd say it was bad. Not that my opinion matters. And I think, sometimes athletes can say, how could you say that, she won silver and stuff. But I think to say anything else would be an insult to how good she actually is. Because you have to remember that Phil Healy has run 51.50 outdoors for 400 meters. She's run 51.66 indoors. So she was over 2 seconds off her best indoors. And that time was run last year as well over in Madrid. So to be that far off it is not a good place to be, assuming she's healthy. And I think that's the reason, we won't be seeing her in the individual 400 out in Istanbul, but we probably will be seeing her in the relay. And it's great that she's actually an athlete who's willing to get on the line, because like you said, she's clearly not herself, whether that was an injury or a training not going well, whatever it was. There's 1,000 different things can cause that for an athlete, and she's working, I think, now as well, which she probably wasn't all of last year. So just that can affect your recovery and things like that. But I think what's great is that she still got on the line. You know, she went to the line, probably knowing it was going to be a hit to her ego, and probably knowing it was like, not that she has an ego, by the way, but like it's to hit to anyone's ego. But that showed great courage, like to get on the line and basically take your beating, but also lay it on the line and try and earn a spot on that relay team for Istanbul, which is what she's done. So I think it's definitely going to be a different indoor season for her. You know, it's just going to be probably going to Istanbul, running a leg of that women's 4x400 meter relay, and then just regrouping and trying to get things right for outdoors. And hopefully we'll see, I suppose, the best version of Phil Healy outdoors, because I think realistically the European indoors are next week. It's too soon to magically turn into like a sub 52 second athlete, which we know she is at her best.
Because she has the qualifying standard from last year for the individual, but like you said there, it's far more likely she'll try and go in the relay.
I think so, because I think only 2 athletes can go on the 400, and you have Sophie Becker, who obviously beat her convincingly in the national championships, and she has to go up, and then Charlene Maudsley, who ran under 52 seconds there last week, and she ran the 200 meters at nationals. I'm not sure why she didn't run the 400, but I think just based on that, if you're sitting down as the selectors, you'd have to go with Sophie and Charlene as the picks for that, and then Phil hopefully making up a relay spot as well, along with the 4th member.
What are your hopes for Phil heading into the outdoor season?
It's hard to know, you know. I think she's always had that balance between the 200 and the 400, and I think they rolled the dice last year and made that decision not to go to the World Championships in Oregon, focusing on Munich. Now, Ciara McGeehan did the same, focusing on the Commonwealths in Munich, and it paid off for Ciara because, you know, I think she went up against some athletes who were probably slightly struggling with the fatigue and coming down off that peak over in Oregon. And I think for Phil, it just didn't fully work out in Munich, you know, individually, that decision. And maybe she would have been saying, maybe I should have run Oregon. Maybe she doesn't. But I think really, yeah, I think the 400 might be where her future lies for, you know, the rest of her career. And I think especially so, given that there's such strength in the relay department, you know, in terms of the women's 4x400, in terms of the mixed relay 4x400. Obviously, she was a world finalist. In Oregon last year. So like there's great ability there and potential for, you know, what she can do on a relay team as well towards the Paris Olympics. But I know Phil, you know, ultimately this is an individual sport. She will want to make an impact as an individual, and I've no doubt like she could still, you know, be in an Olympic semi-final for 400 meters next year if she gets it right. But obviously so many stars always have to align for athletes, and it's probably not going as well at the moment as she wants it to be. But, you know, she's got a good coach and she's a very mature, experienced athlete, so I'm sure they'll be able to find the fix in the months and years ahead.
One Healy's sister we won't see at European indoors is Joan Healy, who's putting the indoor season to one side now, and she's going focusing on the outdoor season and the 100 meters. But she finished up with a silver medal on Sunday. Sarah Leahy ran the race of her life to win gold. But assessing where Joan is right now, I know it was a 7:33, a season best. Where would you say that Joan, would she be happy with the silver, or would she be disappointed not to win the gold?
I think maybe if you told her before the race she'd run 7:33, I'm sure she'd have signed on the dotted line because it was a big season's best. And you know, I think she probably would have thought if I run 7:33, I should win gold against this field, because some of the other athletes, you know, who might have run quicker in previous years, like I suppose the likes of Rashida Adelecki or Molly Scott and that, weren't there. So I think she probably would have been surprised that didn't win gold, because, you know, I think the Irish record was 7:30 up until a few years ago. So she's very close to the best marks for a long time by any Irish woman, which is great running. But yeah, I suppose Sarah Leahy just ran, you know, the race of her life to win that gold. So I think Joan, maybe probably walking off the finish line, might have been a bit disappointed. But I think once she looked at the time, the overall picture and the trajectory, because obviously it was 7:36 in her heat, 7:33 in the final, which is quicker than she'd run. Like, I think 7:35 might have been her best before this. So that's a great step forward. I think I was looking at there this morning, she's 46th on the drop down. And I think in the quota system for the Europeans, but I think only top 40 get in. So she would need a few dropouts. I'm not even sure if that is in her plans to go if she did manage to get in the coming days. But yeah, I mean, indoor season, it's always just like the hors d'oeuvres, I suppose, but before the main course of the outdoor season. It's, for a lot of athletes, it is a way of just breaking up the training and giving themselves a bit of motivation before the outdoor season. But I think And I think the best you can hope for really is just to be running fast and then get back into training, take a quick break, get back into training, and you've the foundation laid for a great outdoor season. And looking at where Joan is at right now, that's exactly what she's done.
How do athletes, Cathal, take the speed from the indoor season to the outdoor season? Let's say for Joan, for example, she's going to go from 60 metres to 100 metres. How can she use what she's achieved in the 60 metres and transfer that outdoors to 100?
Yeah, well, I suppose a lot of the stuff, it's kind of ironic really that the 60 meters is run indoors, because that's the kind of time of year where athletes typically are just doing the hard slogs. You know, they're running up through the forest, they're running up hills, they're doing a lot of over distance endurance work. But ironically, I suppose once they get on a track and start racing, you know, the 60 meters, it's start position, it's acceleration, it's pickup, and then basically before you even get to, I suppose, the phase where they're trying to maintain their speed, the race is over. So you don't really see the benefits, but I would assume that Joan has done all that work. Every sprinter has. She's clearly in good form, so I'm sure she's done all that kind of endurance work. It sounds kind of ironic to people maybe who, and I don't run the 100, but like to non-sprinters that, you know, but it is from 60 meters to 100 meters, sprinters are slowing down. Mm-hmm. So that's the part of the race where you do need all that heavy work to kind of maintain your speed as best as possible. But I think the one thing we've seen basically from Joan this indoor season is that her block starts, her acceleration and her pickup, those parts of the races are definitely in great working order if she's running a 7:33. So I think she can look forward to going at that PB for 100 meters on the outdoor season.
Finally, taking West Cork out of the picture for a second, what was your highlight from the national champs the weekend?
Oh, I'd have to say Israel Olatunde was amazing, 6:57. I mean, I think everyone thought eventually he's going to break that 60-meter record, but 6:61 was where it was at by Paul Hessian, and to take 400ths off it is a massive chunk in 60-meter terms. It's a whopper of a reduction, like. So, and again, he's, I mean, what was he, 5th in Europe last year, 6th in Europe, and over 100 meters, there's no reason now he can't be thinking European 60-meter final. There's about 25 guys who'll be thinking the exact same thing and believing they can get into it. So it will be difficult. It'd be no surprise if he goes out in the semi-finals over in Istanbul. But it's just brilliant alongside Rashida Adelecki and so many others like Phil, who was challenging just off a medal at the last European Indoors, to now have a guy going over there. And, you know, like realistically, it would probably take something in around 650 to win a medal, which is another long way down to get to really be hunting the medals over there. But to think we might have another Irish sprinter in a European final would be very exciting for everyone to get on board with next week.
This is an incredible time for Irish sprinting. Like we mentioned there, Rashida Adelecki, what she's doing is just off the charts altogether. What Israel Olatunde did last weekend, it's like it's this golden generation coming through.
It really is. It's amazing, like, you know. And I think every time, even as someone who writes about the sport, and Rashida Adelecki, given she ran like 50 races last year, you're just on watch every weekend. Is Rashida running somewhere over in Texas or Albuquerque? Where is she running? Because every time she steps on the track for the next 6 months, it's going to be like possible national record, possible leading European time. And she is tracking towards, you know, being, it's no exaggeration, being a candidate for an Olympic medal in Paris 2024 if everything goes well for her over the next 18 months. That's not unrealistic given the way she's already running right now. And certainly like a finalist at global level, perhaps this year in Budapest and in Paris, like that. Those are both realistic. So yeah, it's brilliant to see. And then even on the distance side, you have a guy like Nick Griggs, the young 18-year-old star coming through. So yeah, I think lots and lots to look forward to in Irish athletics.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for your time, Cathal.
Very welcome. Thank you.
The Star Sport podcast is brought to you by Access Credit Union. Access Credit Union, funding dreams for over 50 years.
West Cork club Keal na Mila PRO and Mila Moo's footballer Rosaleen O'Brien is one of 24 individuals selected for this year's LGFA Learn to Lead Female Leadership Programme. Launched 4 years ago, the LGFA's Learn to Lead programme was devised to develop the next generation of female leaders within ladies Gaelic football, and Rosaleen has been speaking to Ger McCarthy.
Now here on the Southern Star podcast, it is a great thrill to have somebody, a representative of the Keal na Mila club in West Cork, PRO for that club as a matter of fact, and also a footballer with the Mila Moos club, who we've heard a lot about in the past and we're going to be hearing a lot about in the near future as well. The Southern Star is delighted to welcome Rosaleen O'Brien to the podcast. Rosaleen, how are you?
Hi Ger, how's it going?
It's going really well. The reason you've been invited onto the Southern Star podcast is you are one of 24 individuals from the entire country that is going to take part in the LGFA's Learn to Lead program at the end of March. So congratulations on that, on being added to that. Can you tell us, first of all, obviously your background in ladies football is heavily involved with the Míle Moves in recent times, but the Learn to Lead program, you're currently involved in another program before you actually get to that national one. So what do you actually work at the moment, and what have you been involved with?
So I'm just nearly finished. I started the provincial leading females course last year, and it's coming to an end on the Saturday, the 4th of March. So it's been absolutely fantastic. And because of doing that course, then when the applications came out to say for the Learn to Lead, I was just so excited and empowered kind of by that course that I just wanted to learn more. So I applied for that, and I'm delighted that I got a place in it, which will be starting Saturday the 25th of March in Dublin. So I'll be meeting the other 23 representatives as well, our participants on the course.
Yeah,
I can't wait.
Yeah, congratulations, because it's not like a lot of people apply for this. It's a national program. It's a very, very important one. It's an informative one. And you're concentrating on the PR and media module. Why is that?
I suppose last year I'm coordinator for the Gaelic One and Sons team. We call ourselves the Míle Moves. We're Keela Míle's team. And I suppose last year we kind of did a social media campaign. And I was kind of doing, say, the Instagram and the Facebook, and another girl, Michelle, was doing the Twitter. And I kind of I always kind of had a bit of a love for PR, but when I started kind of doing it, I got a little bit obsessed. So I just kind of, when I started doing the other course, then I just kind of got a fierce love for it and kind of loving all the ladies football stuff. So I give it a lash and see how I get on with it. So really looking forward to starting it.
Well, giving it a lash is one thing. You have been, Keela Míle, first of all, and Míle Moves have been very proactive on social media over the years. So congratulations on that, because you've certainly made yourselves known to the point that you were so successful that RTE's Pascal Sheehy, you got to meet him. How did that come about, and what happened there?
Well, I suppose we were after getting our place to play in the Ladies All Ireland final last year at half time for the exhibition games. So we kind of started, I just got an idea. There was only 10 people allowed to play on the day. And we have a big, huge group of women that play. So I kind of just wanted to kind of share the love a little bit. And we just started doing a bit of a media campaign where I just started emailing different radio stations, different things like that. So I just tweeted Pascal for the crack, not knowing that he was blowing Kerry for the homecoming, and disturbed him. But in fairness to him, he gave me a buzz after it. And he came down the week of the All Ireland. He came down, and we went live, and we were on RT News then the night before the All Ireland. So it was fierce exciting because we were watching in Dublin, so it was really exciting to watch it.
And the Míle Moves squad, of which I think there's about 42 now,
yeah, we started off the first night with 42 women, and like there's no pressure to ever be at training, so it kind of comes and goes. Different people at different trainings. There's always kind of a core gang that are a bit obsessed by it, but we love it. Like, it's just so much fun.
But this is a Gaelic Mothers for Others initiative that got a lot of women like yourself living in a rural area, just happens to be in West Cork, got you back out, engaging with one another, playing a bit of football, but more than anything, having fun for your physical health, but also for your mental health. It's been a huge success for Míle Moves and Keela Míle.
Yeah, I suppose it started kind of August 21. And I got involved in the Keela Míle club, and my daughter started under 8. I kind of couldn't wait. I'd given up football when I was 16. So when I've been talking about going back for literally 24 years, but never happened. And I suppose I never kind of, we had no more, we didn't have a minor team in my club. I'm from the school. They have a fantastic club going now. And I suppose when I started, I just started helping with the under 10s. And when the second I started playing football, I was just got obsessed again straight away. So we kind of started off laughing, and next thing the following week, our fantastic coach Dwayne Toomey took us on board, and with a couple of other coaches, and there was 42 women arrived the first night. The majority of people, I'm one of few that have played football before. The majority of people have never kicked a ball in their lives, and it's just gone from strength to strength. It's so like it's such a social thing more than anything. It's like a lot of us are not from the area. We're from different areas within West Cork, and we all just come together and have a laugh, and no one takes anything seriously, and it's just all about the fun more than anything.
It certainly is all about the fun from a lot of your social media posts. They are quite funny to watch. But at the same time, as I said, it's an important thing because Míle Moves are an example of what you can do with the Gaelic Mothers for Others program and get people out of the house, get them moving, get them for your physical activity, but also for your mental health. I think it's a fantastic thing. You've obviously done very, very well with that. It's hugely popular. But you weren't even that wasn't even enough for you. You had to become PRO of Keelan and get involved in that side of it and start promoting the club. And is that where the love of the PR and maybe the love of the social media and promoting your club, that's what's led to the provincial program that you're on, and now you'll be heading off to a Learn to Lead national program as well?
Yeah, I suppose I'm only just after taking over as PRO this year for the club. But we actually applied for, our club has been very lucky actually in the last year for everything's happening. We got awarded the Gaelic for Girls program as well. So I'm going to help you out as one of the coaches. And even for an example of the Gaelic Mothers and Others initiative, there's 6 or 7 of the coaches were actually all Míle Moos. So like a lot of the girls have never played football, or some have played maybe in primary school as well. And now that they've got a love for football as well as all the social crack, like we now want to kind of, like give it back, volunteer, help the girls out, get more involved in the club. And I suppose from the PR side of things, just to promote the club more. We're a small club. But the second I walked in that day, I actually never forget it. It was the first night, and straight away, like they were just all so welcoming. It's like being part of a family there. Everyone is welcome. It's just a really inclusive club. So the second I got there, I just knew it was going to be for me, and I just wanted to kind of give it my all. That's why I'm kind of getting involved in the different sections of it.
For somebody, I think you're, Rosalind, I think you're typical of a lot of women who would have played football. I think you played up to the age of 16.
Yeah.
Then life takes over. Maybe you lose a bit of interest. Other things are happening. Obviously, you got married. You've had children, and the time that you could have given to sport is gone. It's taken up with everything else. You're an example of somebody that's gone back to it because you've got a pure love of the football. I know you're playing. You're playing with a group of people. Maybe some, as you said, don't necessarily or haven't necessarily got the experience you have. But it's about staying fit. It's about the love of football being rekindled. But you also have a connection from your school time to a famous Cork LGFA All-Ireland winner as well. Can you tell us about that and who that individual is?
Well, my first cousin, Elaine Hart, won 8 All-Ireland medals. She was Cork's goalkeeper. She was amazing. And I suppose as a girl, like when I was growing up, like I just loved Elaine. Like she was just, like she is amazing for everything she's still doing as well. And I suppose I was always like, would love to be more like her and kept going. I just probably didn't think I was probably good enough to kind of join another club or different things. But definitely, like we used to go to the All-Ireland finals to see her. Definitely a massive regret, like I was telling you before, Ger, is like that I didn't go to more league matches, more finals. Like I was at a lot of men's GA matches, and I feel now I really want to kind of bring my daughter to more ladies football matches. We went to the Cork versus Dublin match in Parky Ring there a couple of weeks ago. We brought a bus load from Keelamila, and it was brilliant. The kids loved it. The teenagers loved it. We loved it. There was plenty of Míle Moos on the bus, and like you were all there watching. Oh, that's what you do. Take your 4 step, like all that kind of stuff to learn the rules. But I definitely I think I'm only realizing in the last kind of 2 years since I went back playing how much I didn't support it when I was younger, and how women really, really need to support the ladies football team, like both Cork, but even our local clubs, to get more people coming to matches is just so important.
The Star Sport podcast is brought to you by Access Credit Union. Access Credit Union, funding dreams for over 50 years.
Welcome back to the Star Sport podcast, and in a few moments we're going to preview this week's paper. But first off, we're joined by our producer Dylan Mangan, who from next week will be taking over hosting duties of the podcast. And Dylan, who's a big Liverpool fan, so it's great timing to get you on, considering their performance against Real Madrid in the Champions League final last night. So Dylan, obviously I'm a Liverpool fan as well. What did you make of that 5-2 hammering?
It was maybe great timing for everyone else, not so good timing for me. The last time I was on the podcast was back in August, just after Man United beat Liverpool 2-1. And I remember saying then that things were going to be okay, that Núñez is going to come good, and no need to worry too much about anything. Since then, obviously, both teams' trajectories have been maybe not exactly how as I would have wanted them to be. Last night was such a strange game because they started off so well, and it kind of felt like one of those performances from a couple of years ago in the Champions League, reminiscent of Barcelona, that kind of thing, where they just come out and blow a team away. But I guess the one thing we've learnt about Madrid, especially in the past couple of years in the Champions League, is that you can't count them out even in the last minute of injury time. Liverpool gave them 75 minutes yesterday to come back, and just watching Modric and Benzema like stroll around the pitch is just incredible yesterday. And they were, as bad as Liverpool were, Madrid were great as well. So it's a hard one to kind of stomach, but you're just watching it kind of in awe of Madrid. At least I was anyway.
But in fairness, Fabinho strolled around the pitch too. I don't think he broke sweat last night, did he? So it's kind of almost the Liverpool form of late. But before we keep going, Jack, Dylan's taking over the hosting duties next week. Do you want to care to tell us why Dylan is taking over the hosting duties? You've decided to leave this parish and you're moving onwards and upwards.
Well, because of Fabinho's poor performance last night, I've been signed as a central midfielder for Liverpool, so I'm taking over the main kind of holding role in Liverpool's midfield from next week. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be available to do the podcast with you anymore. But no, in all seriousness, I am leaving the Southern Star, unfortunately, after 4 years, but I'm very happy that we have another Liverpool fan to step in and take over hosting duties, because obviously it's been a great pleasure to do this podcast with Kieran and later with Dylan over the last number of years. I think we're well into the 200s now, and we haven't killed each other yet. There has been some moments where I would have
disagreements, light disagreements, I'll put it. Like, it's never come to physical. I just caught a glimpse of us there in the screen though. We've definitely aged poorly, I would say. Me more so, I think. I've definitely got grey over the age. Your hair just got a bit wilder. It has. And I've definitely got grey, but I put that down to the stress of working with Liverpool fans the last couple of years when things are on a high. But now you'll see me naturally de-age over the next couple of years as United come back. So, but I just want to take this chance, Jack, to say, as you leave this parish and move on, to say thank you so much for everything you've done for, I suppose, the Southern Star and this podcast. As Dylan was just telling us there, the 216 episode of this podcast, and you've been involved in every one from the start. And this was one of your babies in the Star when you came on board. So you've certainly left your mark on West Cork sport, more so on the podcast you did on the pitch, because we've spoken before about your career with Baltimore and the O'Donovan Rossa hurlers, and it's almost the less said about that the better, because we're still looking for footage of this 45-yard spectacular. I'm still quite happy with my performances with the Baltimore Crabs, I have to say. You're probably the only one, I would think so, yeah, with Baltimore. Hurlers, I could have maybe put in a better shift for them. But you've been what you've done for the Southern Star, for the sports, and you used to cover me in the sports section as well, so you were very much a go-to man for the Star sports section over the years. So just say thank you so much for everything. Best of luck in the next chapter of your life, and we might get you on in this podcast as a guest in the years to come as you go on to take over the world. We might bring you back down here. Well, my fee will be considerably higher than it has been for the last number of years. So yeah, you're going to have to break the bank. But I think it's worth it. It's probably worth it. Maybe you can get me back for episode 250 and episode 300 and what have you, and I'll just come along and slag you off. But yeah, it's been a pleasure, Kieran. Thanks very much for doing the podcast with me, and we've had a good old run of it. But let's switch our attention now to this week's Southern Star Sports section, because we can never end the podcast without looking at what's in the sports section on Thursday, and it is Wednesday now, so we're late releasing this, so this is our last chance to sell the paper. We're all going to lose our jobs if we don't get this podcast out soon. So yeah, there's loads in as usual. Just a couple of the quick highlights off the top of my head. We have a lovely story about the Clonakilty Community College under 14 soccer team that is travelling to Italy at the end of April for the inaugural Adriatic Cup. And why this is an interesting story. Clonakilty Community College will be taking on the academy sides of Lazio, Roma, Udinese and Bologna. So that's the company they're going to be keeping, Dylan, when they fly over to Italy at the end of April. So I have an interview with their manager, Stuart Dollery, who wants to put a call out there to any local business who would love to come on board and help sponsor or give something towards this Clonakilty team that's going to represent West Cork and West Cork soccer and West Cork sport. So they have a lot of great sponsors already, and the full story is in Thursday Southern Star. So this is for our podcast listeners. If anyone from the Clonakilty area or West Cork want to get behind this Clonakilty Community College team, I think we've all the details in Thursday Star how you can get in contact. Of course, we've full coverage of the the Cork footballers lost to Dublin. The Cork Camogie team got their campaign off to a brilliant start. They hockeyed Dublin last weekend, but they have some injury concerns that we detail in Thursday Southern Star, and the Cork ladies footballers lost to Galway. Speaking of the County League, we have a full-page interview with Dylan O'Donovan of O'Donovan Rossa, and he's the son of Jean O'Donovan, who's the O'Donovan Rossa manager. And it's well worth checking this out, because sometimes when you start talking to fellas, the real story starts to pop up when you're just having a chat. And he's actually huge into aviation, and he's working with AirTech up in Limerick. So we talk about his passion for aviation, and there's some brilliant pictures here, because he goes around inspecting planes. He goes, he travels to Poland, Spain, Portugal, inspecting planes to see are they airworthy. So it's quite an interesting piece. We have the usual rugby, soccer, road bowling. A very good interview with Clara Crowley, is the captain of the Clonakilty hockey team. And I actually had Clara here on work experience years ago, and now she's obviously, I had a huge impact on her, and now she's captain of the Clonakilty senior women's hockey team. So we've that and a lot more. So it's a really packed Southern Star on Thursday, on Thursday, which is tomorrow. We also have page specials on the recent Kilbrittain victory dinner dance and the Carbery Score in the Bosch D finals that were held in Ballinascarty Hall as well. So there's something for everyone. And I just want to welcome Dylan on board as the new host of the podcast. Dylan, is going to be, we're really going to ramp it up for next week. We're going to take this podcast to the next level. Now, it feels like there's dead weight been cut from us, and we're just going to move to the next level with this podcast. So I'm excited about what's in store.
I've been waiting in the wings for a long time, Kieran, and I've been making lots of plans. So
Bring it
not
on.
to oversell things, but everyone better tune in next week as well.
I think so, yeah. And you too, Jack, wherever you are in the world, you'll have to tune into the podcast to see what we've up our sleeves.
I will tune in, but I will sign off by saying, if you can't make it to the shops this week for whatever reason, you can always subscribe to the Southern Star online. Just go to www.subscribe.southernstar.ie and read the Southern Star on your computer, tablet or smartphone for less than €2 per week. Thanks for listening to the Star Sport podcast today and always, and thanks as well to our new host and producer, Dylan Mangan. If you enjoy these shows, please make sure to rate, review and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Slán Tamil.